Welcome to the Monitor Mic, where we talk oversight, policing, and you. I'm Stella Cement, your host and the Independent Police Monitor for the City of New Orleans. And with me is Chriselle Williams, our Deputy Police Monitor. This show is your go-to source for discussing policing, law enforcement oversight, and how it all impacts you. From the Office of the Independent Police Monitor, we offer an independent perspective on city government. We also offer an independent perspective on the police department, its work, and its stakeholders. The Office of the Independent Police Monitor, OIPM, serves as a crucial civilian oversight body for the New Orleans Police Department, NOPD. We ensure transparency and accountability within the police department by making sure that NOPD follows their policies, abides by the consent decree, and is compliant with all local, state, and federal laws. Our office operates independently from the NOPD and the federal monitors. What do we do day to day? We take complaints of officer misconduct from the public and from police officers. We review misconduct investigations conducted by the NOPD's Internal Affairs, which is called the Public Integrity Bureau. We're on call 24 hours a day, every day of the year for officer-involved shootings and critical incidents, and we'll go to the scene and monitor the force investigation from start to finish. We're advisory members of the Use of Force Review Board and disciplinary hearings. We run the Community Police Mediation Program, and we engage the community to ensure your voice, opinions, and concerns are heard. We, your hosts, are not police officers, but we are experienced attorneys from the criminal legal field, dedicated to transparency and accountability. We encourage you to call in with your questions, comments, and concerns. You can reach us on air at 504-582-9422. While we may not address individual cases, we are committed to following up with you. With that, let's learn more about today's guest. Chriselle?
Today we are joined by Representative Matthew Willard. Representative Willard is the Louisiana State Representative for the District 97 in New Orleans. He serves on the Ways and Means, Insurance, and Municipal, Parochial, and Cultural Affairs Committees
It's a mouthful.
in the House of Representatives. Representative Willard, a graduate of the University of New Orleans, is also the founder and chairperson of the STEM Innovation Caucus and the chairman of the House of Democratic Caucus. Matthew is a director of marketing and communications at Yokogawa Fluence Analytics, a former technological startup that provides continuous analytics and process control solutions for the polymer and biopharmaceutical industries. The company was acquired by Yokogawa Electric Corporation in 2023. Representative Willard used his technology background to create the STEM Innovation Caucus, which is a bipartisan effort focused on economic diversification, K-12 STEM education, new job creation, and workforce development training. During his first term in the Louisiana legislature, Representative Willard passed more than 20 bills. He has been recognized as a 40 under 40 leader by Gambit New Orleans and has received multiple awards for his social advocacy and economic development initiatives in Louisiana legislature. And again, if you have any questions for Representative Willard today, please don't hesitate to call 504-582-9422. So, Representative Willard, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and sorry for all those mouthfuls of words, Kershell. I know that was difficult to get through.
We did our best. But for folks that may be unfamiliar with your district, can you share a little bit about what neighborhoods actually make up District 97?
Sure. And first of all, thank y'all for having me, and happy Friday, everybody who's tuning in right now. So I represent District 97. The bulk of my district is Gentilly, so I represent all of Gentilly. I also represent areas around Bayou St. John, the Faubourg St. John Neighborhood Association. And then I have a couple of precincts across the Danziger Bridge, right by the Chef Endowment Corridor, the Melia Neighborhood Association. So I represent them as well. Some of the lakefront neighborhoods. And for my first 4 years in the legislature, I represented a good chunk of Mid-City as well.
Okay. So now we want to ask you a little bit about your assessments on public safety and policing. But before we do, it's important to first establish what does public safety actually mean to you?
Yeah, public safety to me is a comprehensive term that covers everything from policing to fire and EMS to 911 call operators. It includes, quality of life areas in our neighborhoods, infrastructure, the streets. I mean, I think that's a public safety concern right now, especially street lights, blight, litter, debris, wasted tires. All of those to me are public safety elements. And so I think it's a comprehensive picture, not only in keeping the community safe, doing what we can to be proactive about it, but it also includes our firefighters and our EMS operators and the 911 workers who are there, and other quality of life issues. So I think when you talk about public safety, you have to address all of those elements.
I really like that your answer includes both the theoretical concepts like safety, crime, quality of life issues, but also includes the departments that are responsible for responding to those issues. So you see it as something that touches on a city government's responsibility and something that touches on the public's, just the way that we move around our community together.
Absolutely. If you talk about the roads in the city of New Orleans right now, I have to call that public safety because they lead to accidents.
Yes, they 100% do.
And then if you talk about broken street lights throughout the city of New Orleans, we know that crime tends to fester in areas that are dimly lit, especially at night, which is when a lot of crimes occur. And so that has to be involved in it as well. And then you have to talk about the litter and the blight and the illegal dumping in the city of New Orleans as well, because I really think all of that is integral into a public safety plan. A lot of people are going to just talk about policing and law enforcement, but just as important as EMS, how quickly can they respond to calls, right? Just as important as our 911 response time. How long do you have to wait before you get connected with somebody who can provide those services? Same thing with the firefighters, because they're responding to emergencies just as much as police.
And that links back to what you were saying about the roads. It's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
If our roads are damaged, it's difficult for our first responders to be able to get to scenes.
Yep.
Just like it's difficult for our residents to be able to get home.
I mean, some of our streets are impassable for times that,
Absolutely.
for weeks, days at a time. And so
Months.
how does that affect an emergency response coming to your house?
Right. This is a very holistic, comprehensive view on public safety. So now I think we are going to want to chip away at that and focus just on public safety as it might pertain to the police department and I guess crime, but mostly police responses.
Yep.
So what are you hearing from your constituents? What's the word on the street? What are people writing to you about, calling you about when it has to do with policing issues? Can you give us an overview of the type of feedback that you're receiving from District 97?
Yeah, and if I could, I'd like to go sort of through a timeline. When I came in 2020 into the legislature, we were experiencing COVID, right? And COVID obviously increased crime, not just in the city of New Orleans, but throughout the country, and a lot of that made sense. One of the issues that was magnified at that time was juvenile crime increasing, and a lot of kids were not in school. Our kids were not in school, right? And some of the kids had difficulty doing the Zoom sessions either because they didn't have an adult present in the home, or maybe they had technological challenges. And so when we talk about that, one element that we got to include is truancy, right? But at that time, the response that I was getting from the people I represent is that there's no visible deterrent. And so if you recall, 2020, 2021, probably all the way to 2023, you could drive around the city of New Orleans for up to 20, 30 minutes and never encounter a law enforcement vehicle. And so if, Joe Citizen is doing that, obviously the people who are committing crimes are seeing that as well. So they feel more emboldened because they don't have that visible deterrent. Today, we know the crime rates are going down, and I do think people are more comfortable about it. But at the same time, I think crime is very isolated to a person's experiences, right? So you could be at the lowest crime rates ever for anywhere in the world. But if you get carjacked, if somebody puts a gun in your face, if somebody breaks into your home,
Yes.
then that is the biggest issue that you are dealing with at that moment. So I think it's very relevant based on situational experiences. So right now, I think, in the last couple of years, something that I was a bit apprehensive about at first was Troop NOLA. Now, I have to let everybody listening understand that even going back to Governor John Bel Edwards' administration, the New Orleans delegation was trying to get support from state police. And the response we received was there's not enough resources. We don't have enough troopers. We were trying to get help with state police really to focus on our highways and on the interstates. And if you recall, during COVID, we also had those very scary situations where people were getting shot while driving on the interstate.
Yes.
And so we were trying to get help with state police then. And so the way it came about, the creation of Troop NOLA, I wasn't involved in the creation of that. And I was worried about, what the relationship with NOPD and the sheriff's office would look like for the people of New Orleans. But I have to say, I think most people in the city would admit that they feel a bit safer with Troop NOLA in the city. We have a greater visibility deterrence, like we were just talking about before. And through my conversations with some of the NOPD captains, Troop NOLA has a good working relationship with NOPD. And so today, when I hear from people in the city of New Orleans, the talk is going back to community policing, right? Better relationships with the NOPD officers who serve and protect us. And, that's really the focus right now. Major crimes, let's focus on major crimes. We still have a problem with people who just drive irresponsibly and remember, and we were having the neighborhood intersection takeovers. And so since Troop NOLA came, we're definitely seeing a decrease in that area. And so, for me, a lot is about, community policing and improving relationships. But to their credit, NOPD has those community liaison officers who do a lot in our schools. They go to our neighborhood association meetings. So that type of working relationship with the public, I think, is certainly a step in the right direction.
It 100% is, and we're happy to hear that you've hit a interesting tapestry of issues that are happening all over District 97. And I say that to really highlight the next point, which is that you're going to be running for the City Council at-large seat.
I am running for it. Yep.
You are running
City
for it.
Council at Large, Division 1.
So how are you going to transition your perspective from just District 97 and those neighborhoods that we highlighted, Gentilly, Bayou St. John, the Chef and Dowman areas on the other side of Danziger Bridge, and some of the lakefront and mid-city neighborhoods? How are you going to transition to looking at the city as a whole? Because your campaign slogan is a voice for every neighborhood.
Yep.
And in our neighborhood, and I think as you highlighted with situational experiences, everybody might have a different perspective on public safety, on priorities and policing needs or disparities. And that might change block to block, literally neighborhood to neighborhood.
Yep.
So how do you intend to represent everyone and all those differences when you're thinking specifically about policing while on the council?
Yeah. So that's a good question. For me, Voice for Every Neighborhood is actually based on the work that I've done in the legislature. I go to all my neighborhood association meetings. And I even go to some that are outside my district, especially after my colleagues elected me to be chairperson of the House Democratic Caucus. And so for me, it always has to start with a pro and con list. You're going to have differences in opinions across the board on any issue. But what's important to know is the feedback from the people who call New Orleans home. And so we have to have more open communication and dialogue. Council at large members don't represent a particular district, but the way I'm approaching this race and the way I'll approach the city council is to make sure that every city council district feels like they have two council members. So I want to obviously represent the needs and interests of the city, but also want the people in the neighborhoods throughout the city of New Orleans to feel like I'm a second advocate for them. And so for me, I think a lot of New Orleans share, as it relates to policing and law enforcement, share a lot of common similarities, right? Everybody wants to feel safe, whether they're in their home, whether they're going for errands to go to the store, whether it's related to their children going to dinner one night. Everybody wants to feel safe. And I know, NOPD is exploring technology offerings right now. And for me, as I lead on city council, I would pay attention to the budgets, not just for NOPD, but for everybody. I would try to work with Chief Kirkpatrick and the captains of NOPD to figure out what their needs are. I mean, everybody says that we have a policing shortage and we need more officers in the city of New Orleans. And I think there are certain things that are working against us on that front. The consent decree is often cited as an issue for recruitment and retention. The prohibition on lateral hires, possibly having the opportunity to bring people in from other departments who have seniority, who have multiple years of law enforcement experience, but then they come to NOPD and essentially have to start over, right? And so for me, it would be a lot of listening early on, a lot of working with stakeholders, obviously giving a lot of attention to what NOPD is requesting, what the information that they're providing us, but also in the neighborhoods, right? A lot of neighborhoods in New Orleans feel like they don't have that visible deterrent, right? A lot of them feel like there is no NOPD presence in their area. And a lot of them, you go right now and they say, well, crime isn't a big issue for us right now, but these other things are, that we were talking about as it relates to public safety, right? And so I think there's a common thread that can be heeded to on the city council, and that's kind of how I would approach it. But first and foremost, making sure that I engage with all the stakeholders, not just NOPD, not just law enforcement, but also with the neighborhoods and our civic leaders.
I think everyone wants to feel safe could not be more true. I would also add that everyone wants to feel safe when calling 911 for assistance. They want to make sure that the treatment that they receive from the law enforcement officers that respond is going to be consistent, fair, comprehensive, and peaceful.
Absolutely. And that's a right.
Yeah.
We should all have that right.
We should all have that right. So when we're thinking about safety, we have to think about it from all of those different perspectives, because some people might not be calling 911 for problems, or might be reluctant to ask for that police visibility because they are concerned about how those interactions may go for them. So for people that have these types of differing perspectives on the police department, for individuals who might not be entirely as empowered or in a position to be able to advocate for themselves, so they're not going to be the loudest voice at the table or the most resourced, how do you ensure that they're heard by you if you were elected to city council on policing and safety issues?
Well, the good news is that I have a lot of experience with that just from my time and service in Baton Rouge in the legislature, because there's a lot of stakeholders, it's across the board at every level of government, who are going to show up in committee meetings and council hearings and just be loud and bang the drum and try to drown out any other feedback or differing schools of thought. For me, it goes back to what I was just talking about, making sure that I do the work to engage with all of those stakeholders. So visiting neighborhood associations, giving them an opportunity to weigh in on certain issues, hosting town hall meetings to talk about what's going on at city council, but also to hear feedback. Now, to a certain extent, there is a responsibility on the people. They have to show up at one of these venues. I can't go knock on every door and write down survey questions and say, how do you feel about this or that, right? to a certain extent, they have a responsibility too, but I'll do everything that I can to give them as many options to engage with me and really to inform my decisions. Because one thing that I quickly learned in the legislature is that every time I make a decision at that time, I want it to be the most informed decision. Now, obviously, subject matters change and opinions change. But at that time, I want to be able to have as much information as possible so I feel comfortable making an informed decision.
So let's talk about some of those informed decisions that you might have to make on questions like the use of facial recognition software for the police or other live surveillance systems. Do you think, piggybacking on everything you just said about ensuring that you're hearing feedback, decisions like this should include community meetings, public comment periods, or even public votes?
I don't know about public votes because to some extent you authorize your elected officials to make decisions. And so I don't necessarily know about public votes, but as far as the input, absolutely. I mean, that's what a democracy is all about. Some people lead thinking that, well, they elected me to make decisions even if they don't like the decisions that I make. And I totally disagree with that. That's why I really try to stay boots on the ground in my district and make sure that I do have an informed decision. One of the things that I think works to our advantage in the legislature is every year before session, we get to send out a survey to our districts, right? And so it's a mailer. So it's a little mailer where you can check off your responses and write stuff in and then mail it back. But also we get a digital link. So I can send it out to my email list, and people who didn't get the physical mailer can respond, on SurveyMonkey. I think that's the platform we use. And so when I go into session and I say, we're voting on, do we want to lower personal income taxes, but increase the sales tax? I know how my district feels about that. I know how the people I represent feel about that. I get, over 2,000 responses. So more of that type of behavior, I think, is necessary. So I absolutely think that the people have a seat at the table. As far as public votes on some of these issues, I think that might be a little bit too far. Because at some point you have to say, we elected you, you make the tough decision.
We elected you. You make the tough decisions on the police departments, on public safety concerns. So if you were making those tough decisions today, where would you start with NOPD? What do you think the greatest challenges that they're facing today?
For me, I think, recruitment and retention. There's been a lot of talk that at some point Troop NOLA will either disappear or require the city to put up money for that. So my focus would be to make sure that NOPD has what it needs to properly protect and serve the community without any additional support. So for me, it would be there, making sure that the policing, whether it's the technology or interactions with the officers, are constitutional, right? That's why we're in the consent decree right now, making sure that those are constitutional and just encouraging open communication and dialogue and giving the police chief and the captains an opportunity to let, myself as a council member know what issues they're facing, how they think the city council and the city of New Orleans can help them. Because at the end of the day, I think if we work collaboratively, we can all work to better protect and serve the citizens of New Orleans. And that's where my focus would be.
So if elected, how would you support the police department's agenda, I guess?
Well, you have to hold them accountable. So NOPD, just like every city agency, gets funding. We need to make sure that funding is being utilized properly. One of the issues we have are with academy classes and the funding required for that. But really, it would be informed by the people performing the work. And then the conversations you have with the community, they also get to weigh in and say, well, we don't feel safe and protected here, right? We need more patrol. Or, hey, we have a lot of, kids who get stopped by police officers in the evening when they're walking home from the park and they're not doing anything wrong. Stuff like that. I mean, the way I would approach it is to make sure that I'm a big proponent of transparency in everything, right? I've done a lot of bills on transparency in the legislature. So making sure that operations are transparent to the greatest extent possible, making sure that NOPD is accountable not only to the city council but to the people of the city of New Orleans, and then working in a collaborative approach. You know, I certainly wouldn't just rubber stamp and sign off on everything. I would do my own due diligence and my own research and hold my own stakeholder engagement meetings before making final decisions. But I think, you know, if we work collaboratively, including with the people, we can move us in a better direction.
So, starting in 2023, the council now has the power to vote to confirm mayoral candidates for department to leadership positions, including chief of police. So, with this mayor election in the fall, may be another opportunity for a confirmation hearing of a police chief. What do you see your role to be in that process?
Right now, I mean, I would expect it to be Chief Kirkpatrick again. I think she's done a good job. I think a lot of people maybe scratched their heads when she was confirmed as the hire. But I feel like she's done a good job. And from the NOPD officers I've spoken with, they all appreciate her leadership. So, you know, just, hey, how can the city support you, Chief Kirkpatrick? Is there anything that we need to discuss? Are you, you know, communicating with the residents? You know, just greater dialogue. I mean, it would really focus on kind of what I answered to the previous question. You know, it would be that same process, making sure that this is the leader that we need. Making sure, assuming let's say it's not Chief Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, what if it's not?
Yeah, so what if it's not Chief Kirkpatrick? How well do you understand the community? Give me examples of your leadership in action. Do you have any red flags in your background?
Yes.
How do you think you'll integrate into the city of New Orleans? Because that's something big too. We need somebody who's going to embrace the city of New Orleans and everything that comes with it, right? And give me examples of how you've turned things around. Tell me about some tough decisions that you had to make. Tell me that you're resourceful. How did you turn $1 out of 50 cents, right? How do you stretch your budget? How do you do more with less? You know, look, I love questioning and debating. So I would really get into it and get into the weeds and really just try to make sure that this is the best strategic fit for the city of New Orleans at that time, and make sure that it is a leader that can inspire others to follow, because that is very critical, especially as you talk about the chief of police. They have to inspire optimism. They have to encourage people to follow suit, and people have to be confident in their ability to lead.
That is all so true. That's a great diversity of questions. I'm loving those questions.
Those are just off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
I think that you'd be a good person at grilling any potential candidates. So
Yeah, I like that kind of work.
yeah, if there's anyone listening who
I should have gone to law
throw their
school.
hat into the ring. So this radio show is an opportunity for us to look at policing and how our community is policed through a lot of different lenses. And I want to take us back to 2023, to the legislative session, when you proposed a House bill that would really force people to change their perspective on how the police police. You wanted to reduce the reasons why the police could stop people in order to both ease the financial impact of ticket fees on low-income drivers, but also there was another component to that, which was, you know, are there disparities in how people are being pulled over? So that's a powerful legislative idea. We have to say that. And second, can you walk us through your vision for that House bill? That was House Bill 322 that you put forward in 2023. Can you talk to us about what that was about?
Yeah. So that bill deals with minor traffic offenses, which are primary offenses right now, meaning just for one of these offenses, a police officer, law enforcement can pull you over. And typically in those cases, they'll give you as many tickets as they can. because it's a source of revenue, right? So they may pull you over because you moved from the right lane to the left lane without a blinker, but then they find out, your tint's too dark, or you have. This is one of the issues that my bill was going to deal with. You have fuzzy dice hanging from your rearview mirror.
The old
So
fuzzy dice problem.
yeah. So brake tag inspection stickers, right? And so it was really going after some of these minor traffic offenses and trying to move them into a secondary offense, meaning it can't be the only reason a law enforcement officer pulls you over. Now, if you go into the brake tag thing, that's an entirely different debate. I will say, since I filed that bill in 2024 and in 2025, there was legislation to totally do away with inspection stickers with brake tags. Right?
I hope so.
I listen.
Not to get political. Not to get political, but yeah.
Lord.
But there was also a provision in the bill that said they can't, come up to you if you cross somewhere that's not a crosswalk. And if you think about the city of New Orleans and how, like, I just parked on the side street here and I didn't cross at a crosswalk.
Right.
I just, waited until nobody was coming and I walked over. Right. So, obviously trying to limit interactions, but also to try to help with staffing crisis, because at the time, law enforcement agencies, especially in the city of New Orleans, were really suffering from a staffing crisis, and that was before Troop NOLA. And also just to, I thought some of those things should not be primary offenses. And I got the bill out of committee. I made some amendments. And the bill that went to the House floor was only dealing with the inspection stickers.
Right.
And what I was trying to do with the inspection stickers is give you an additional month grace period upon expiration. So right now, I think you have 30 days. So if your inspection sticker has expired more than 30 days ago, they can pull you over for that reason and give you a ticket. I was trying to extend it another month in the bill that went to the House floor, so it would have gone for 2 months. And then the other portion of the bill was dealing with crosswalks, I believe. And so it was just saying you can't give somebody a ticket just because they illegally cross somewhere that's not a crosswalk. And so that's what the bill was doing. It got heavy opposition. There's revenue implications there, which is why the inspection sticker bill hasn't passed, because it's a source of funding for law enforcement. But that's why I ran that bill, and I thought it was relevant at the time for sure, and I still think to some extent that it's relevant.
I was going to say that the Louisiana Sheriff's Association, they were some of the stakeholders that opposed this bill in its original format.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought up a famous example of secondary issues like broken headlights that can lead to uncovering important information in an investigation or finding wanted individuals. And I believe that the example they gave was the Unabomber, but actually, just to be clear, it was actually Ted Bundy who was arrested after being pulled over for driving without headlights.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the reasons why they said we need to keep these minor infractions as primary reasons to be able to potentially pull someone over. He believed that those minor infractions could be opportunities for important police interactions with the public. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess, I would say I probably disagree with a lot of it, but, law enforcement is saying that. For me, a big portion of this bill also was dealing with poverty. So we have a lot of people who are just getting by, barely getting by. To go get an inspection sticker often requires you to take time off of work to go and get that done, and you have to pay for the inspection sticker. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was trying to go get one, and the place I went to was actually closed that day. Right. And so you have instances like that. But even with like brake lights, and look, you need to have functioning brake lights, and your blinker signals should work and all of that. But if the money just isn't there, and we have an affordability crisis, especially in New Orleans right now, if the money isn't there, piling up tickets on somebody isn't going to fix the problem,
Yeah.
right? And taking their vehicle away because they're not paying the tickets won't fix the problem. It's going to make it worse because now all of a sudden this person has to rely upon public transportation, which isn't the greatest in the city of New Orleans either, or utilizing bicycles, which is not the safest in the city of New Orleans either.
It's really about policing poverty in
Right.
some ways. is
Yeah,
what-
and
is
that
what I'm
was
hearing.
yeah, and that was a big impetus with this bill. A lot of these people are living in poverty; they're just getting by, and so we're gonna pull them over and write them tickets because they literally can't afford to fix whatever the issue is in their car.
It was a creative idea.
I
It
thought-
really was.
Thank you.
And it could have had a big impact, I think. Can you give us some examples now of legislation that if elected to city council, you would pursue on a local level that could also touch on how people are policed and could have a similar big impact?
Right now, nothing is coming to mind for stuff like that. It's easier to address issues like that at the state level, and I
Right.
don't know to what extent you would be able to do that locally. So I would have to explore that to actually look for some ideas. But if people out there who are listening, if you have any ideas, send them my way.
Yeah.
I love community input. I've filed a bunch of bills in Baton Rouge based on ideas that the public sent to me.
So you hear that, listeners? Call 504-582-9422 and give Representative Willard some ideas on legislation that you have.
Local,
This is your
like,
time.
local
legislation.
stuff.
Don't
Yes.
miss
This
the
is a wish
opportunity.
list opportunity. And to all of our law enforcement listeners, this is also your chance.
You're the
There you
community
go.
as well.
You're the
There you go.
community as well. So call in and say, no, we wouldn't want that, or this is what would help us do our job better, safer.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna keep taking you down memory lane.
Yes.
We're gonna go into 2021.
I like to reminisce.
Yeah, Michelle, do you want to go into 2021?
So while we're still walking down memory lane, in 2021, there was a survey conducted by LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. And one of the findings was that most Louisiana residents believe police treat black people worse and less fairly than they treat white people. And at the time, again in 2021, you gave a statement that you were not surprised by the recent survey results. If that survey happens again now, what do you think the results would be?
I think it would show the same. I mean, I really do. This week in Florida, we saw an incident where a young man was pulled over, and apparently the law enforcement officer was frustrated and upset and punched through the window and then punched the guy in the face. And so I think you would still see similar results there if you were to survey that. It may have gotten worse. I mean, the rhetoric and tension in Congress, trickles throughout our communities and in our neighborhoods, and I think that intensifies stuff like this. And you include the Hispanic community, and it's probably even worse there.
I think what you're highlighting, just the fact that what happens nationally and in other places, other states, matters with how we look
Definitely.
at our police here.
Yeah.
So even though that officer was not wearing an NOPD uniform, and even though I would like to believe that NOPD would not have handled that traffic stop the same way, it still speaks to a general sense of what people might carry into a police interaction and what might fuel fears and distrust.
Yeah, and I think it would probably depend on how you phrase the question.
Of course.
Right? If you kind of leave it open-ended, people are going to be talking about the things that they see and hear on the news. And for me, us just having that experience informed that decision. But I think if you go back to 2021, what did we have then? We had
We were
George
talking about
Floyd,
Floyd,
Breonna
Breonna.
Taylor, yep. And then a year or so later, we had Ronald Green in the
Yes.
state of Louisiana. So we keep seeing these instances, which in a lot of cases just don't make any logical sense. And so I think if you surveyed the state again, you would get similar response, and it might be even more overwhelming today.
So, if you win the at-large seat on City Council, how will you address this treatment and disparity and how the public is policed in New Orleans?
I think it goes back to everything that we've been talking about, the dialogue and the communication, and just making sure that the public feels like they have an opportunity to engage with law enforcement and its elected leaders. And obviously, I have to work with you guys, the independent police monitors, because you have all the data, you have all the information, and so I think you have a pivotal role to play in that as well. But for a city like New Orleans that is welcoming to all, we should not have any disparities, and so that would be something that we all have to pay attention to, because we know marginalized and neglected communities often remain silent,
They do.
and so we have to make sure that even in those cases they feel comfortable coming forward and telling their story, because if the knowledge is not known, we can't address any problems as a result of that information.
That is so true. Communities that are scared to call 911 to report crime, that means that crime is going to go underreported, they're going to go underserved, and there could be a lot of reasons why they're scared. But we want to make sure that everyone feels safe calling 911, and everyone is happy with the services that they receive when they do. Or maybe happy is a bit of a stretch. More, they understand the results that
Yeah.
they received when they call 911.
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, if you call 911, you're obviously in need of help.
Yes.
And so you expect the person on the other line to be willing to assist you in a promptly manner, in a timely manner, because emergencies, it requires immediate attention, but also when they come out and respond, that you will be respected and taken seriously. And I know a lot of times with domestic violence situations, for instance, there's doubt, there's disbelief, the story doesn't make sense, right? We have to do everything we can to make sure that we don't have that bias to where, victims of domestic violence can comfortably report what's happening and not feel humiliated because of the way that the law enforcement officer responds to the situation. Because obviously that's going to make you not feel like you want to call for help again.
Exactly. It affects crime victims. It affects individuals who might be handcuffed. It affects the individuals who are doing the arresting, who are policing our streets.
And the worst thing you ever want to hear from a victim is, I wish I didn't call 911 or call the police.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I can't.
that's
I can't. That's terrible. That's awful.
It's awful. It's awful. But and we want our police officers to feel equipped and supported to be able to do the hard job that they have to do.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
it's
because
a lot of
being
balance.
in law enforcement is a very difficult job,
It's a
and
difficult job.
I hope everybody understands that they have a very tough job, so everybody has to work together.
Everyone has to work together, and everybody has to decide together how policing is going to benefit our community.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, there's a lot of discussion lately about new technology that might be used in policing. Things like facial recognition technology, live surveillance possibilities, and heuristic tracking. What are your thoughts on the role of city council in setting potentially limits on this use, and the balance that might come in between ensuring that police officers have every tool available, but also protecting community privacy?
Yeah, I mean, for me, first you have to look at constitutional rights, and I know the facial recognition technology. I'd be interested if you asked the people of New Orleans how they feel about that, how they would respond. To me, I think it's pretty mixed bag. Some people like it, some people don't like it. Initially, I would say, the big brother aspect gives me some concern. Also, I know at least when a few years ago when this was being explored, there was some racial bias in the technology in saying that, we're looking for this black suspect, but it identifies somebody else. And now you have a response to this innocent person, which can be escalated because what innocent person would be expecting SWAT or a bunch of officers to roll up on them? So I would actually really go through the technology. What are the pros and what are the cons?
Right.
Show me results that you're experiencing in other municipalities,
Okay.
in other states. How much does it cost? Are we going to have any savings realized from this? Does it help with resource allocation? What is the direct need that it's addressing? Because I don't think we should just willingly go for any and all technology just because it's the shiny new toy, right? It has to be filling a need. And so that's kind of the way I would approach it. I know a lot of this technology is nuanced, but I work for a technology company, so I have I have to say I agree that there are technologies out there that we can utilize, not just for NOPD, but inside City Hall, period. A lot of our systems and processes are just super antiquated. And, one of the good things about technology is that it improves efficiency and it improves effectiveness, right? But you have to properly train people on it. So as it relates to technology for NOPD, we have to make sure that any and everybody involved with the technology or accessing information from the technology is rightfully trained, thoroughly trained, and you need guardrails, right? So can't give you a blank check to utilize this technology. So I think that's a job that the council should have, setting up those boundaries and those parameters. This is how you use it. This is when you can use it. This is prohibited. So I think it needs to have tight guardrails, especially as we start to explore and potentially implement any new technologies.
Well, that was a very helpful answer. And to anyone who's listening who has the ear of council, I think those are some great questions that city council can ask. And to anyone on the law enforcement side, we would love to hear some answers that would be able to help inform this debate that's kind of unfolding in real time.
Now, NOPD's abilities to access facial recognition. We're still going to talk a little bit about facial recognition technology, but their ability to access the facial recognition software will be put in front of City Council as a vote soon. Just going to ask you, Representative Willard, if you were on council now and that vote was before you, what would you do?
So I like to know what I'm voting on. So if I was on there right now, I probably would oppose it just because I haven't had the opportunity to ask these questions and get all of the information. And maybe the information that I have on the technology is skewed. But if you said, Matt, you're a councilman for a day, and by the way, we already debated this legislation, just vote. I'd probably vote no because this is a massive change, right? And so I would really need a lot more information to inform that decision. I mean, I would need to know what are those guardrails, what are the boundaries in utilizing this facial recognition technology? How accurate is it? Can we give it a test, maybe 100 random examples as a test case, and see how many times it correctly identifies the right person? But at the same time, look, I mean, this was a tough year for us, right? We had,
It's a tough year.
yeah, I mean, we had a terrorist attack. No,
Right.
I certainly didn't see that on our radar. And then we had a prison escape, right? And so you can't deny that certain technologies could be helpful, but at the same time, you got to make sure that everything that we do is constitutional. It has to be within the confinements of the consent decree. And the council has to use its regulatory and rulemaking authority to say, if we do move forward with this, here are the clear boundaries, here are the clear guardrails before any NOPD officer utilizes it. They have to go through this training. All of those things need to be discussed as you talk about not just facial recognition technology, but any technology as it relates to law enforcement, protecting and serving the people of New Orleans, in my opinion.
No, great.
I
wish
agree.
little chat. That was a very thorough answer. And I see that we have a caller. Let's see if they're calling with a wish list item. Hi, Miss Alicia. You're on the air with the monitor's mic.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hey, Miss Alicia, how you doing?
I'm great. Rep, let me ask you a question. My wish list. The
Yep.
top of my wish list. Because, I do a lot of consulting, helping people, get through the permitting process for occupational business and even alcohol permits. What can you do and what is your plan for making big changes with safety and permits? One stop ain't one stop,
No,
and it is absolutely horrible.
it's anti-business.
I'm just saying it is very anti-business. What I would like to say, I hope that you guys, help the mayor choose the best person in safety and permits,
Yep.
because that's critical. It's very critical. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you,
Thank
Miss
you.
Alicia.
Thank you,
That's a
Miss
great question. For me, the safety and permits process in New Orleans is very antiquated and anti-business. Had a meeting with somebody today, and they were talking about if they have an opportunity to do business in New Orleans or the city of Nashville, where they could possibly get their permit the same day that they put it in, or New Orleans, where it could last 3 to 6 months. Where would you go to do business? A lot of the processes need to be streamlined. A lot of them need to be upgraded technologically speaking, and obviously the council has the authority to confirm and the council has the ability to confirm those hires. And so I would do my due diligence and ask all the tough questions to make sure whomever we put in that position is a change maker, because they have to approach that office with a dynamic state of mind that I'm going to turn things around within the first 30 to 90 days, because the fate of New Orleans is at its stake. Safety and permits is definitely working against us right now.
And that really goes back to the very first answer
Yes.
you talked to us about that has to do with public safety. And how public safety folded into it is that all of the different agencies and departments that are slated to serve you are working effectively together and are accessible to the public, because all of this feeds into one another.
So Stella, I'll give you a quick example
Yeah.
of how safety and permits ties into public safety.
Please.
A lot of developers, smaller ones, may move forward with projects because they can't wait 6 months. It's delaying the entire construction process, right? So maybe you say, hey, they'll approve it eventually, but I can't wait for them to approve it, so we'll keep moving forward. What have we been experiencing in the city of New Orleans over the last few years?
Building collapses.
Building collapses. Correct.
That is a very good example. And again, if you're on an illegal site, a site that doesn't have authorization to be doing the work that it's doing, is what I mean by illegal,
Yep.
then you're less likely to call the police if something goes wrong on that site.
Yeah, that's true.
You're more vulnerable.
Yep.
And that's just very frustrating for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, really good points. In our final minutes, is there anything you would like to share with our listeners just about your platform, who you are, what you're about, just to send us out?
Yeah. I was elected to the legislature at 31. I became the chairperson of the House Democratic Caucus, I believe, at 35, the youngest person in the state's history and the only one from the city of New Orleans. I'm 36 right now. I think I bring a lot of new ideas and energy to the city council. And listen, for me, it's about prioritizing the essentials of city government. Right now, the essentials of the city of New Orleans are not functioning properly. Boil water advisories, poor streets and road conditions, power outages, street lights being out. I mean, we all know the problems. We've had a tough 20 years, all the way from Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Ida, sprinkling COVID and the Hard Rock building collapse in between. We get by because we're resilient. At what point do we go from surviving to thriving? I want to be everybody's next council member at large and work with every neighborhood in the city of New Orleans to move us forward. And thank
so
y'all
much.
for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Right,
coming on and sharing
yes.
so many perspectives with us. Asking
And so
really
many
good
questions.
questions.
Yes,
I know.
that
I
they-
wrote down those
look,
questions.
What do we think talking about.
I enjoyed this. I love debating and answering questions and asking questions. I don't want to go into a special session, so this was like my fix for now. So thank y'all for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And that wraps up today's episode of The Monitor's Mic. I want to send a heartfelt thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and staying engaged with the crucial conversations we're having about police oversight and community safety. Thank you so much to Representative Matthew Willard for joining us today on The Monitor's Mic. We appreciate all of your perspectives on public safety and your citywide representation plans. Thanks for being a part of today's conversation. And if any of you out there miss any part of today's show, I want to catch up on past episodes, visit our website at www.nolaipm.gov, and you can find and follow us on YouTube at NOLA IPM, and you can also follow us on social media for updates and news. On Instagram, we're NOLA OIPM, and on Facebook, we're New Orleans Independent Police Monitor. So until next time, stay informed, stay involved, stay cool, stay committed, and to building a safer community. This has been The Monitor's Mic.
Especially cool.
WBOQ